North America. And I'm going to play the screen because we've got some great speakers, and I've known some of them for a very, very long time. And it's about different sustainability approaches for extensive green roofs in hot and dry regions. From our perspective in Europe, we're talking the Mediterranean. We've got a lot of people from Portugal actually on this call who booked, whether they're here is open. But this is the agenda. We've got Zoltan Kolcsar from Romania. We're really pleased to see Bruce Dvorak, who came and did a speech on this a couple of years ago. We've got Ed Snodgrass from the United States of America as well. And we're going to finish up with Maurizio Crasso, who's from Trieste in Italy. And we'll have a little discussion, a Q&A. I'm going to play that by ear because if, you know, I might ask people to actually speak their question, or I might just read out some of the questions. And then we will have a little conclusion about the event. And I'll finish up with what's next and upcoming events from the EFB and partners around the world. That's our federation. We've got 18 national associations. You'll see there's 4 together, which is our Scandinavian Association. And we've got extended networks. We've got the Green, World Green Infrastructure Network, ELCA, European Landscape Contractors Association, IFLA, the Landscape Architects, So Green. And we're involved in quite a few European projects. So, you know, keep in touch with us. I just wanted to highlight over on the left-hand side, that's Recorder Gorge in Romania. I spent some time out in Cluj, where Zoltan is from. And I was out in Trieste about 6 weeks with Maurizio talking about plant available water, which I know he's going to go into in quite a lot of detail. And there's me building a green roof with Ed on the Mall in Washington, D.C. in 2009. And I've just published a video, which I'll come to in a moment. But Bruce has written this great book about eco-regional green roofs in Western USA and Canada. And one of the roofs that I know that's in his presentation is Borrego Springs, which I happened to visit last year in October. And I've just today, because of this webinar, published a video on this in association with everybody downstairs, which is EFB GROW, which is the UK trade body, the Polish Landscape Architects Association, World Green Roof Day. So there's a link to it. We'll share the QR code with you, hopefully at the end. And without, I'm going to move on. I'm just going to get Zoltan's, you know, what his title is. And I'm going to introduce Zoltan Kolcsar. He's the president at Converde, which is the Romanian Association, technical director at Ecostratos, managing director of ODU Green Roof, board member of the European Federation of Green Roof and Wall Associations. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Zoltan. Over to you, Zoltan. Zoltan, he's coming. Great.
Yeah, please, dear Zoltan, unmute yourself. We can hear you now. No.
Do you hear me?
Yes, now we hear you. Wonderful.
Okay. Also, my screen is visible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Dusty and Tatiana, to share our experiences in Romania. I'm working in the green roof industry for almost 18 years. So we try to share some techniques. Maybe they will contribute to improve your green roofs. So let's begin because time is running. We have 15 minutes for the presentation. So in Romania, also as everywhere in the world, we have the problem that in the cities, in the middle cities, the effect of urban heat island is very, very powerful. This year in Bucharest, we experimented very high temperatures, over 41 degrees for a few days in a row. So we have to prepare the green roofs to have better shape to resist in such conditions. To move this, to realize this, we have to improve the sustainability, the green roofs with different ways, which must together has a result of resilient green roof. Increasing the depth of substrate more than 15 centimeter, if it's possible, is very, very important. But sometimes we don't have such a huge 200 kilogram load bearing in our project, so we have to find other ways to improve the water retentions. So we have to choose very, very good, adequate growing medium to solve this problem. Also, the visible part of our green roof is the vegetation. So the vegetation must installed in a way to resist even in harsh conditions. One way to improve this resistance is to select native resistant plants. The most important thing is not to forget that the retained water on the roof is not the same with the available water accessible for the plants. I will return with more details later. Other smaller ways using the albedo effect when we install a green roof through cuttings, and of course the most important thing, increasing the biodiversity, creating a natural habitat is the best way to solve these problems and set up an extensive green roof which is resistant. Of course, these all will drive us to have smaller maintenance requirement. It will be a small delay, about 5 seconds to move to the next slide, but soon we are going there. So usually we don't have the possibilities to increase the deep of the substrate. But it's more important is to insist at architects to increase the load-bearing capacity of the roofs, because the deeper the substrate is, we can create better conditions, because as the roots go down in the bottom layers where the temperature is lower and they have excessive water, they can resist to the stress. Otherwise, the root will suffer of the overheating of the surface. Here you will see 2 of Romanian projects where we had the possibility to use 15 centimeter deep substrate, and it makes possible to enlarge the number of species we installed, and we can in such way create resilient habitat where some species helps the others and create better condition for surviving. Well, let's go back to the most important thing, the quality of substrate. When we choose a substrate, we have to check its water retention capacity, porosity, and also how plants behave in such a conditions. In these pictures, you can see in the lower picture some sedum species in the substrate which is very rich in nutrients, and they hardly develop some small thin roots. On the top pictures, they are installed in a volcanic origin ash substrate, where this one is high porosity. It has a high capacity of water retention and also high content of minerals, oligo elements, So it will drive the plant to develop a very, very strong root system, which is like herbaceous plants, not characteristic for the sedum. In this way, the sedum is prepared for harsh conditions, and it will behave better than in a peat or compost content substrate. By minimizing decomposition, it will remain at a constant height, and also is very, very important. It will not develop a water repellent surface characteristic usually for the peat content substrate. Here I want to show you a showcase in Romania. About 8 years ago, we installed a 2,000 square meter roof in Romania. Everything was fine. We get very good vegetation coverage in the blanket. We installed it. The beneficiary was very happy. And we start to maintain this roof. You have to observe that is in the middle of the city, surrounded by a huge block of flats made by concrete. So it's a perfect case of urban heat island effect. Next year, in the summer, the first summer after installation, surprise appeared. In the June, the roof looks beautiful. It was flowering, and after that start a very dry period. That means temperatures above 41 degree for few days, and for 2 months we have no rain. And also in the evening, night time, the temperature doesn't get below of 30 degree. So in these conditions, the blankets contract, and the most viable species which under intensive care in a nursery disappeared in such harsh environment. It wasn't prepared for this, and only 1-2 species left which strive to repopulate the blanket to get again good vegetative coverage. Unfortunately, this water repellent surface which appears between the colonies doesn't permit to accommodate not even local species that would normally occur. And after 8 years, the roof is still in very, very poor condition. You can see some isolated sedum spurium colony, which are well known that they have very deep roots. So they were the only species survives. And between the colonies, we have uncovered surface where we can observe only moss and very, very few isolated local herbaceous plants. So what is the solution? We have to choose the right blanket. Some people can say that it's only characteristic for the agglomerated urban environment, but near the seaside, at the coastal area where we have very dry winds and high temperatures and high solar radiation, this type of blanket behaves in the same way and develops into chessboard-like green roof with a low regeneration potential, unfortunately. So we can avoid this situation if we choose better vegetation blanket. Well, the solution could be, it's one of our proposals, to use a sedum blanket, which was made, which was cultivated mainly in volcanic ash-based substrate with low organic content. Here in the nurseries, in such harsh conditions, the full vegetation cover can only achieve in few years. From the cutting have been spread, but after that we will have no surprise when we put the blanket in dry, harsh environmental conditions. Here, sorry, I'm in the hurry to respect my time. So in Arad, we have made last year 2 huge projects where after 1 year we have no surprise with such a blanket, no shrinkage, no gaps between the installed rows, and the vegetation coverage is almost the same when we installed it. Well, going back to the nature, we have to imitate the nature and select native drought-resistant plants. Here is a project we made about 7 years ago, and in 7 years the vegetation adapted to that conditions, and only the most resistant plants like sedum spurium with deep root system survive, and now it represents almost 80% of the vegetation coverage. Similar high slope green roof, only with 5 centimeter thick green roof system. Here, beside the sedum spurium, appears also sedum acre and sedum album, which are resistant to heat and radiation. And their weakness here is not a problem. They doesn't support the water logging, but in this slope it's not the case. So we must to pay attention to the water availability, not just the water retention, which is just a statistical figure. Well, if we have architectural problem, limitation that we can install just light green roof systems, we have to maximize the water retention, if it's possible, at least to 50% of the saturated roof's weight. For this, we have to use some new solutions, I mean new drainage and water retention board, which made accessible the whole retained water. Well, here you can see a comparison between different types of drainage board. First of all, on the second, on the right 2 columns, you will see the classical drainage board made by polypropylene, polyethylene with cup type cavities. Usually these boards retain about 10-15 liter per square meters, but it's not available totally for the plants, because even if these cups are filled with water, if the filter geotextile is stretched over the cavities, there is no connection between the water and the substrate. So the plant's root usually doesn't penetrate the filter geotextile to enter in the cavities and to absorb water from there. So the solution could be another innovative accentuated hydroaccumulation board made of recycled polypropylene threads, which can retain almost 10 liters per square meter in every centimeter of thickness. And the best characteristic of it will be able to transfer this whole water quantity to the substrate through capillarity, because it's on the complete surface of it in contact with the substrate. And also, if we install herbaceous deep root plants, these deep roots can penetrate this board and access the last drop of water. So this is very, very important to set up a system which permit the plant to absorb the last drop of water. In this way, we can minimize the substrate height, because it's partially replaced by this drainage board, which can act also as like an artificial substrate, permitting for the roots to penetrate, to grow in it.
Great. Zoltan, you've only got a minute, mate, I'm afraid.
Yes, okay. I'm quick. The essence was told. So with this type of system, we can cover like bus shelters, metal structures where we have limited load-bearing capacity. Also in 5 centimeter 6 green roof, we can obtain water retention 40 liters or more. This will be enough for sedum, and sometimes local herbaceous plants appears here. Another possibility, if the green roof is installed through cuttings using a white volcanic substrate, and the albedo effect can protect the young plants against overheating and sun radiation. It's important to enrich this green roofs with local plants. Deep-rooted herbaceous plants can provide shelter for other plants, and if we put around 60, 70 different species on the roof, every time, in every conditions, we will get 20, 30 plants which will survive in that conditions. Here are some proposals, but I recommend that every one of you to go and check surroundings where you installed a green roof, and look for dry, sandy, rocky area, and check what kind of plants survive there, like does 10 or more than 10 years ago, Dusty in United Kingdom with blueweed. He transformed the roofs of London. So I'm finished my presentation. Here you have a small overview about a few sustainable green roofs of Romania. I'm waiting for your questions in the Q&A session, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks very much, Zoltan. I think a key point there is, for me, I'm Northern European, is that we've got a lot to learn from the South, and that'll come up when Maurizio's here, because roofs are struggling. I was in Berlin last year, and it's normally 80 to 100 mil in Germany. They're now talking about having to increase it in Germany because of droughts. So I'm very quickly going to, that's a little comment from me. I'm now going to hand over to to Bruce, who's a university professor in Texas. Are you okay, Bruce? Oh, sorry, it's Ed, isn't it? Sorry, Ed. Ed is president of Emory Knoll farm over in Maryland. And sorry, Ed, I got you out of sync. So if you want to share and head forward, Ed, thanks.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Just here?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. So I think one of the things we have to acknowledge is that there's all these different climatic regions in the US, and Cope and Geiger does a good job of mapping them. And this is always changing as climate change comes forward. So I think areas that maybe weren't dry and challenging may become dry, and other places may become wetter. And I think it's really good to keep up on these kind of climate maps to have your plants be appropriate. This is the Australian native plant garden in Cranbourne. And I think one of the real lessons here is that these plant types that grow in different ecoregions also grow in different soils, soils with different particle size, pH, water, drainage. All these physical properties are not separate from the plants. So I think when we think about having dry plants for green roofs in different locations in the world, we might have to, like Zoltan said very properly, we might have to adapt our media to match those plant choices. I have been on the team at the University of Melbourne for about 15 years now, and this is their plant trial roof. And I think this is essential for green roof markets around the world. So if you look at this slide, in the foreground, the soil depth or the media depth is 10 centimeters, and it goes up to 30 centimeters in the back. Additionally, everything to the left of that center planter is non-irrigated, and the right side is irrigated. So green roof people from around Australia can look at this and say, I have 15 centimeters, but I don't have irrigation, and they can go right to that part of the roof and get plant evaluations. And it's very important to do this in every region and over a longitudinal time frame, because it takes years sometimes to understand how these plants will react. So this is essential. I'll share this is their guide of 15 years of experience. So folks that get the presentation can go on, or you can just go on Burnley Green Roof Plant Guide and you'll navigate to it. So I think some general principles, the green roof market really internationally evolved in a climate that things were very easy to grow in. And so that kind of had that sedum blanket worked everywhere in Holland and the wetter part of Germany and England. And then as it grew as an industry, I think we've got more challenges. We go into harder climates, and I think additionally one of the challenges is the green room market, at least in the U.S., was kind of taken over by roofing companies, and plant people weren't really involved as much. So it became part of a roofing system, and we need to get plant people more involved. So this is Mexico City. I've done some work in Guadalajara and Mexico City. This is the Mexico City Botanic Garden plant trials, and these things are really important. And there are analogs to different climates around the world. So we can learn from Australia, we can learn from Mexico. This is in Casablanca, in Morocco, and this is a building with just naturally occurring green roof. This is a north-facing slope on a metal roof, and these aeoniums are very happy there. But if you go on the south-facing slope, there are no plants at all. And I think one of the things we also have to realize in dry climates is that there can be very, very subtle differences between the north-facing and south-facing. Like Zoltan said, that solar radiation can be very powerful. And so I think these are really interesting lessons to see. And you may have to adapt on a sloping roof, one plant choice for the north-facing side or the south-facing side. Of course, in Australia, the north-facing side is the hot side and the south-facing side is the cooler side. This is in Sichuan, China, and this is a naturally occurring green roof. Again, this is actually an annual sedum called Sedum magniflorum. I don't know if it's available anywhere, but again, you can see this, how aspect, and this is on clay tile roofs. Just the slope, the wind, the amount of sunlight changes the population of the plants on the roof. Again, in China, this is in Taiyuan in Shanxi province. This is a cool little plant called Orostachys fimbriata, naturally occurring again. I couldn't use it on green roofs in China because they consider it a sign of poverty. So you get into these kind of sometimes a cultural overlay with selecting plants. In Australia, there's plants that are very important to the Aboriginal community, and they may want them on plants. So I think you always have to be aware of not only physical characteristics, but sometimes how the local population relates to a plant choice. This is here at a trial at my farm, and you're seeing, again, I'll give Zoltan credit for the media substrate depth. So from right to left, it goes from 10 centimeters to 20 centimeters to 30 centimeters to 60 centimeters. And you can see these poppies that were sown, how the health of the plant is really relative to the substrate depth. And so those plant choices are going to have to be really carefully considered. And substrate depth, like Dusty said, it changes according to how hot it is and that heat penetrating down into the soil. This is in a shallow 7 to 10 centimeter system. It's about just about a hectare of roof. And this is now 18 years old, I think. So this is a American native, Talinum calicinum, the little pink flower there. And there are some Phthaemus tachysimensis is a succulent in there. Those are the only two plants that are left after about the 15-year mark. And it's found this lovely place where this is in a very hot climate in Virginia. Nothing else can live there except these two plants. So if you get the substrate depth right and the plant choice right, your maintenance goes way down. So this is very important for pollinators that bloom. It blooms every afternoon between 2 and 7 o'clock. So if you go up in the morning, it doesn't look like much. In the afternoon, it's really amazing. So I think this is one of these lessons learned, like this is a commercial industrial park. They don't want to be up there doing maintenance. So the more we can keep the maintenance down, the happier they are. This is Lava Beds National Park in Northern California. This is 1,100 years after the volcano, and there's one plant growing, this little western buckwheat, Eriogonum umbellatum. So I think sometimes you look at these natural areas and you go, wonder what the first plant in is, and you can find that, and that thing, if it gets established, is going to be very resilient and tough against drought and climate. This is back in Mexico, looking for plants. This is in the middle of the street. This is a little plant called Portulaca pilosa. I think Bruce has used this up in Texas also. And it's very, very tough. We looked all over the nurseries in Mexico for this plant and then found it right outside the office door growing in the street. It's pretty easy to propagate. It distributes by seed. And so these are clues when you're looking in an environment for plants. One of the things that you have to look for when choosing plants in dry climates is the effect on that plant and how it responds to shallow substrates. So this is our eastern buckwheat, and so this is 5 years after planting, and you see it's a very short plant. And in contrast, here it is after 2 years just in soil. So this plant might be a good plant for a green roof, but the deeper the soil, the happier you're going to be, because you can see. Whoops, sorry.
It says your presentation is not displayed on the screen.
Uh-oh. So people aren't seeing it?
I can see it. I can see
Oh,
it.
okay.
Oh,
All right.
sorry.
I think it's
We
a
gotta
network. I think
We
it's a
just got a
network.
message.
We got a message it wasn't displayed. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a network issue, Ed, with somebody else, but carry on, mate. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is in South Africa using South African natives. And you can see, I think one of the cool things about trying to find local plants is that they really map and blend into the surroundings and look very natural. So you're using local stone and natural areas, and they have a little porch roof made out of wood. So again, it is very harsh, and it's a Mediterranean climate in South Africa, very similar to the Mediterranean in Europe. Now, one of the things that you get in these Mediterranean climates and the hot climates is that the atmosphere has a high capacity to evaporate moisture compared to the American Gulf states, where it gets very hot, but it's very humid. And so you don't have that evaporative loss. And so you have to compensate if you are going to irrigate, to use sub-irrigation or strategies with fabrics to hold moisture once you get it. So there are different strategies in these very low humidity climates. This is at the Denver Botanic Garden. And I think one of the things as we get into dry plants on green roofs is that we have to live aesthetically with space between the plants. It's a very, I know, and there's even specifications in the United States where they want full coverage. They have this big thing to get the roof covered and completely vegetated. And I think when you get into dry plants, you have to allow the plants some space because their root systems go out laterally underground, and you want that tributary root system to get out to be able to harvest moisture. So just the last couple slides here. One of the strategies I think that we could employ on dry green roofs is to use dry annuals. They're not going to bloom for a long time, but they have real pop. This is Nemophila maculata from the American Southwest. And it's just, when it blooms, it just really, really goes, it has such a presence. And it may only bloom for a few weeks, but then maybe another annual comes. So I think we're not using annuals as much as we could, open sowed stuff to supplement the perennial plant choices.
Your last.
And I had one more slide, but.
Go for it, Ed.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, here's another desert annual, Phacelia campanularia. And again, these things really pop with color. I think they're really great choices to supplement. And all this is going to be relative to people in their local region, really understanding the flora in the region, and also analog floras in other parts of the world. Just being careful that you're not bringing something in that would be invasive. But I think the challenge and beauty of dry area green roofs is the expanding horticultural opportunities to really have some very, very interesting plants on green roofs. And I appreciate being able to be in this great group of speakers and to see my old friend Dusty again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. Well, I mean, Ed, you've been doing this a long time and you've got a lot of knowledge. I just wanted to make a couple of comments there. I mean, I think this idea of white substrate is a very, very good idea, even in northern climes. I think space between plants is very, very important. I think it was a huge mistake that 100% coverage has been set up in parts of the United States of America, because, you know, that forces us to use things that may not be appropriate into the region. But I'm now going to hand over to Bruce, who's from Texas, because Bruce has been doing a lot of work down in Texas, which is pretty hot. and he's written this great green book, a book which I'm sure he'll promote, and I'm going to promote through the video that I made. So over to you, Bruce.
Okay, great. Do you see my slide?
We do see your slides.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dusty. It's an honor to be here again and to help, contribute to the conversation here today. All right, so I want to begin with this slide and just talk a little bit about the book and how the book came about. In North America, as Ed mentioned, the roofing industry brought green roofs to North America. And along with that, sedums became the default. Sedums from Europe, from Asia, from all over the world became the default plant material. When people started trialing green roofs in the West, some of those sedums were trialed, and of course, they could not sustain the temperatures. They just fried. So people went to the native palette, and there are a number of green roofs in the Western U.S. that make use of native plants and in some cases even mimic plant communities to some degree. And those plants are very successful there, but it's not just, pick any media and throw it up there and it's going to work. There are a lot of details to that. So I became very interested in these questions, how deep is the media? Where does the water come from? What plants are being used? So that was the impetus for this book. So I had a research semester, took a tour of the U.S. With my family, and I visited 144 green roofs. 72 of them made it into this book. So that's how the book came about. This photo you're looking at here, this is one of the older green roofs in North America, the Anzo Borrega Desert. It's a nature center, and they just brought 12 inches, about 30 centimeters of growing media up onto the roof, and they used the desert palette. And the plant spacing is far apart. It's not full coverage. It's mimicking what's happening in the back. If you see in the hills back there, the plants are not all close together. So they did the same thing on the roof, and that works together. So I have just a few things from the book to share today. So I think one of the biggest questions, as what was mentioned earlier, is like, well, how do you approach bringing plants onto a rooftop? And in the Western U.S., climate and microclimate is everything. Elevation, the elevation you're at, determines the temperatures, also precipitation, and the length of the growing season, the air temperatures, maximum, minimum during the day. So you have all of those variables that need to be thought through. So the question of substrate depth is a critical one. And from what I've seen, for the most part, in the really hot areas, this was mentioned earlier, you're not going to have a shallow substrate, 15 centimeters. There are a few, but they're more on the West Coast, up in the Northwest, where you might be that shallow. In Phoenix, Albuquerque, they're going 30 centimeters, 25 to 30 centimeters minimum. And if it's a new building, that's not typically an issue. It's the retrofits where you have to adapt the weight and the substrate depth to what's there to begin with. Okay, so there's some good research out there. Dr. Jeremy Lundholm published a paper many years ago called Habitat Templates. So it's the idea of looking at nature, getting outside, looking in your own backyard or the region to see, well, which plants are adapted to that hot, dry region. And I'm just showing a contrast here. The image on the left is Las Vegas. I visited there, I think it was October last year, went out and took this image. They only get 10 centimeters of precipitation a year. And yet there's still vegetation there. Look at the spacing on it. Versus Kennebunk sand plains, this is in Maine. You see way in the back, there's the forest. But this is a glacial deposit of sandy, gravelly soil. So this is a prairie out in the middle of nowhere. And the temperatures in this area are a little bit warmer than what's around. But these plants are adapted to that condition. This is little blue stem growing in here. There are a number of other species growing in, mixing there. So this idea of looking at nature as a place to find plant communities, I think there are analogs just about in any kind of climate, and they get quite a bit of rain every year, but it's still a dry condition. Okay, so the substrate, is the depth and the type, as what has been mentioned before. I really love that image of the Melbourne demonstration pilot project. I agree wholeheartedly. We need multiple pilot projects in each region. And if people can come together, the universities, the providers, the installers, the people who maintain them, and really look at these pilot projects to test out what kind of plant materials work, that can help a new region move forward. I think sometimes local ingredients in the substrate can work. It's not in this presentation, but there's a green roof in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They used a little bit of the native soil at the base of it, and they used an engineered media on top with seeds and plugs. And they've had quite a bit of the natural seed that was in that soil bank pop up onto the roof. So it's a way to bring some biodiversity onto a rooftop. And that way, the plants that like that microclimate, they adapt there. And the ones that don't, they never really develop. In Texas, yeah, prickly pear is pretty widespread plant. It even, grows out in the east. In those little microclimates where it's dry, it's warm, maybe a south or west-facing slope. If you look at the plants, I have in this drawing here, right at the base of the pad, prickly pear pad, you see a little set of roots that the plant has adapted to this environment. And I think what the plant is doing there is collecting moisture from dew. So if there is like some morning dew, maybe it hasn't rained in a while, but it has an opportunity to capture moisture. And then it has a deeper taproot, which stores water in that root system. So this plant is very tough. I've tried it in many different environments in Texas, even in a 11-inch substrate with no irrigation. I've had prickly pear survive through the summers. And it grows out on cap rock environments, very shallow soils, rock all around. It heats up, so it's a very hot environment. So the plants are out there. It's just mimicking the substrate and drainage characteristics that the plant will be happy there. If you put this on a flat roof with poor drainage, it's probably not going to last very long. So the plant needs to be happy. So you need to mimic that environment there. Which is the next point here is, when you select your plant, you have to match the roof deck environment. So if you're given a flat roof, then you might have to say, well, which plants are going to thrive in that condition there? It's a low slope. The water's not going to move fast when it rains hard. So maybe it could be a mesic condition. I don't know. If the roof is sloping, has a decent slope to it, 3%, 4%, then the water is going to move through. You might have a different set of challenges, but you may not have standing water in places. So you want to select plants that will adapt to that. As Ed mentioned before, there are other plant choices you can make other than perennials. Looking at annuals, bulbs, there are many bulbs that can bloom at different times of the year, or maybe they're just dormant. There are rain lilies that grow in Texas. They sit dormant for the whole year, but in the middle of June, when a erratic storm comes through and it rains, they might pop up if the conditions are right. So there are a lot of different ways of getting color and biodiversity onto a rooftop. This roof is out in the Phoenix area. So it's a 31-centimeter substrate all the way through. So you can see the arrow here. There's a pretty decent slope. And what they did with the planting is they said, well, at the top of the slope, they know that there's going to be less precipitation or less moisture in the substrate. So they spaced the plants further apart. And they said, that's okay. It's going to look different than at the bottom of the slope where all the moisture is moving towards. So there is more moisture there. And so there are taller plants there and plants that can survive through those different conditions. So that's an important thing to think about. You know, the green roof may not look uniform all the way across. It may look different at different parts of it. Okay, so the big question is about irrigation. I know some parts of Europe or even parts of North America, you may not need irrigation because there's reliable rainfall during the summer, even distribution, and you can select plants for that. But you know, Texas and parts of the West, you know, if there's very little precipitation and it's hot and dry for months on end, there may need some source of water. So there are sustainable sources of water for green roofs. Things such as harvested water from rooftops, gray water, which includes water from sinks inside buildings, faucets, or other sources. If there's a natural source of water nearby, that can also be used as well. Since the media is very dry, I think Ed or somebody mentioned this earlier, you might want to deliver that water lower into the substrate, not on top. Typically spray irrigation, you're going to get evaporation, the water is going to move through. I've seen many different applications, some on top with drip, some below with drip. It's really based on the plant choice and how the whole green roof is set up. And you might have multiple short deliveries of water as opposed to one long time. Okay, a couple examples that are in the book. Heron's Head, this is on the left, that's in the San Francisco area. They do have dry periods there, and even there they look for sustainable sources of water. This is a nature center. It's nearly completely cut off from all utilities from the city, but those two water harvesting tanks are collecting all the water from the rooftops, and they use that water to irrigate a biodiverse roof that's on the top there. On the right-hand side, a brand new hospital in downtown San Francisco, where that guy is standing. He's with part of the design team that installed the green roof. That wall is one of the edges of the cistern. It's a giant cistern, which holds thousands of gallons of water. So this is part of that rainwater harvesting system. They use the water that's collected in that cistern, which is in the basement of the building, to irrigate the green roofs. And so there's another sustainable source of water. Probably one of the most preeminent examples of just complete sustainability is any building or many buildings that are built with the Living Building Challenge as a guide for their development. The Bullitt Center, this is an office building in the Seattle area. They're completely cut off from electricity, water, and sewer. And here the green roof, you can see in that little square up in the center right. Those are native wetland plants. So all of the sinks, the toilets, the shower, the dishwasher, all that water is collected internal to the building, and they use that water to pump up. It goes through a sand filter, a solar filter, then it goes up to the green roof to take out the nitrogen and whatever nutrients that might be in the soil. Then from there, it goes to a rain garden down below. So the image to the right of that, there's a rain garden down there. And the water percolates into the ground. So it's a complete loop, a complete cycle there. If you do get outdoors, you want to start exploring different habitat templates. This is showing a prairie environment. You know, topography has an incredible effect on the soil moisture. So think about the top of a hill. If you're looking at the plant community there, it might be a drier, more xeric environment. Where down at the bottom of the hill, that's where the water is collecting, gravity is pulling water there. So it'll be a wet environment. And these mesic environments, which can be very applicable to green roofs, those plants can tolerate drought, and they can also tolerate being flooded temporarily. So there's some good guidance out there by just looking at the type of plant communities that are there. Trying to navigate. Here we go. Okay, semi-arid climates. Yeah, so just here's a little more repetition on some things I mentioned before. How am I doing with time, Dusty? I have a couple more minutes. All right. This image here is showing the slide ranch. This is out in California again. In this case, they constructed the entire green roof, including the growing media and all the plants, from the actual materials of the site. So they there's gravel areas. They collected the gravel, the sand. They collected the seed from the meadows, and they established the local genotype of the plants onto the roof. So there's no shipping of materials, you know, the low carbon footprint. This takes a very special client and a champion, someone that's going to watch over this roof and make sure that it's going through. As people have mentioned, maintenance before maintenance is critical. So the roof needs to be designed with the person that's going to maintain it. And it's best to have a manual that writes, you know, all this stuff is written down. So the next person that comes in, they can communicate this to the folks that are doing that. There are some things about sustainability with microclimate of buildings. This is Albuquerque. On the left-hand side, you see that sand-colored face of the building. There's always reflective heat coming off from a south or west-facing building in this part of the equator, North America. So that's a maintenance path there. They built that in because they knew they're going to have reflectivity down onto the roof, and the plant choice would be difficult. So they set the plants apart. Again, this is a LEED building. Harvested rainwater is the source. And again, I think this is a 30-centimeter substrate with native plants. And then if they share this, some publications, recent publications with green roofs there. So that's what I have to share today.
Well, thank you very much, Bruce. I just wanted to say for the Europeans here, MESIC, about the nearest I can think of as a MESIC environment, which both Ed and Bruce mentioned, is probably the Hungarian steppe, bit of steppe down in Austria. I know Jürgen Price is here from Vienna. That's the closest I can register those kind of plains, prairies in a European context, but you're also down in Spain and Portugal. A lot of people from Portugal on this call, I think, and the Alentejo. If you can stop sharing, Bruce, that'd be cool. A couple of really important points there, I think, you've mentioned is dew, because there were roofs in Athens which were basically in the winter basically survived because of dew and condensation. So condensation we should be thinking about when it happens. I think also this sloping roof use that happens in the UK. You know, we get very dry plants at the top and we get denser at the bottom. So I think a lot of what you said we can bring to our northern climes to help us deliver green roofs, which is a great way now to pass over to my great friend Maurizio, who I've talked to for years. And the Italian standard is the only standard in the world which actually deliberately talks about plant available water. And I think Maurizio will be talking a lot about that. So I'm going to hand over to Maurizio, who is Managing Director of Harpo Pensile Verde. I was out there 6 weeks ago. He's also a Vice President of the European Federation of Green Roof and Wall Associations. And I just finally, when I sit and talk to Maurizio, we argue about substrate for as many hours as possible because he knows a lot about substrate. So over to you, Maurizio, and you got to share your screen.
Thank you, Dusty. Okay, now I try to find the presentation. Yeah. Can you see the presentation?
Yep, can see it.
Okay. Thank you, Dusty. Okay, I'm sorry for two things. One is my English, very poor, so I hope you can understand what I'm saying. The second is, despite all this, the presentation you have seen now, my presentation is really not with very nice picture. I try to concentrate my presentation on technical things, so sorry if I will be boring a little bit. But as Dusty said, I would like to focus on the available water that for us is really an item, especially from the physiologist point of view. You see on the left the Walter Elliott diagram. There are two Swiss researchers. I hope you know this graph. They put in this graph the average of rain, monthly rain for some years, and also the temperature. The red line is the temperature, and the temperature can be written as the evapotranspiration rate. So what you see, for example, in this graph is in the Mediterranean area, the red line in summer is on the top of the blue line. So it means that evaporation is higher than the rainy water. So if you see, it matches completely with Florence. Florence, you know, is more or less in the middle of Italy. We have two peaks of rain, one in spring and another in autumn. But in summer, you can have few months in which is not enough rain. If you look at the picture of Palermo, Palermo is in Sicily, you see that you can have in many months in which you don't have enough water. And Palermo is, in fact, you can consider as a semi-arid Mediterranean, but really not really typical Mediterranean, more semi-arid condition. I put this time also the Stuttgart graph, in which you see that Stuttgart is on the other side of the Alps, so in the middle in Germany, in the middle of Europe. What you see that the red line is always all the year down the blue line. So it means that in Germany they have always enough water, and probably another factor, as Bruce said, they have also high humidity, so the evapotranspiration rate is even lower. So you see it's the big difference between the continental weather and the Mediterranean and semi-arid conditions. So it is clear from this graph, from our point of view, that we have to irrigate. At the state of art of our knowledge, we have to irrigate in our climate, at least a part of the year. Not always, of course, but a part of the year. So general consideration. So we have to irrigate. The question then is how and how much we have to irrigate. This is the question that we are asking ourselves. So which are the main factors to consider? So for sure, the vegetation water needs. So of course we have, as Bruce said, we have to consider the vegetation type we use. So of course, and so which is the type of the vegetation, and then which is the best solution. Then of course from that is the water availability, and then coming to, still staying on the more description stage, the substrate thickness. This is another important factor, because we will see that the thickness is, or we are checking now that the temperature of the substrate is a big factor, because compared to a natural soil on the ground, on the ground you always have some humidity that is growing up. You know? In a green roof you have waterproofing, so underneath you don't have any kind of water, but you make it with irrigation. So the temperature in a substrate is another factor. So what we are trying to, or we are studying from several years, is the water potential approach in a soil. Sorry for this graph, because I put on paper these days. So what is the water potential? Is the pressure, the strength that we have to apply to take out the water from the substrate, and this is in the vertical axis. On the horizontal axis, we have the water content in percentage, from 0 on the left, growing on toward the right. The potential is normally considered as negative, so is coming from the bottom to the top. So we have here, I try to just to introduce the discussion. I would like to compare a clay soil with a sandy soil. So the clay soil is this yellow line, and the sandy is the blue line. In the middle is a substrate, but we will take it afterwards. So the withering point is the point in which conventionally the plants cannot they absorb the water anymore. So they die because the water is so linked to the soil that they are not able to use it. So you see that in fact the clayey soil has in fact a lot of water inside, can be, I don't know, 30, 40% or even more. But you see, when you reach the withering point, you still have a lot of water inside not available. So the water available is really not so much. On the left side, we have the sandy. The sandy soil, of course, is you have a very low water retention. It's clear because the sand is not able to keep the water. And you have these two extremes. So in a arid condition, what happened? No, consider that you have a low rain rate. No, you have just small rains. So what is better, a sandy soil or the clayey soil? Consider that, for example, we have if we have a content of 5%, when you have a small rain, for example, 1%, it is really used by the sand. It's available for the vegetation. If you see the clay soil on the right, even is not even the soil. Sorry, it doesn't realize that some water is came, because really, if we add 5% of the clay of the water in the clay, is useless completely. So it's not still not available for the vegetation. So in principle, what we have to do, of course, is a substrate, something like this, in which you have a lot of available water, but when you reach the withering point, all the water can be used. Okay. So this is, but the main point of the graph is this one. So what is better in a desertic or in a arid area? Is better a sandy soil or a clayey soil? Is better a sandy soil. It seems really strange, in fact, from a point of view, but if you think about that really in an open mind, you can realize that that is true, because the clayey soil to have the possibility to share the water with the vegetation, it needs a lot of water. It needs to be saturated, in fact, and then you have a lot of water. In a sandy soil, in fact, if you have a lot of water, like in a continental area, really the sandy soil is not good because it cannot keep the water. So this is just an example, an extreme example, to say how much is important the water in a substrate. So main consideration are water availability. Of course, when you have low rain rates, is higher in sandy soil than in clayey soil. And the same concept can be used for the thickness of the substrate. What we have seen, and we have made already a publication with the University of Trieste, with the physiologist, green physiologist, is that when you have a low thickness substrate, a small rain in percentage carry a lot of water, and then in a higher thickness substrate, the same quantity of water is really not significant. So when you have, there are some vegetation that we realized that they live better in a low thickness substrate than in high thickness. When you don't want to put a lot of water, no, to irrigate a lot. So the item is to create a substrate or to use soil, whatever, that can maximize the water availability, of course, excluding the free water range. And then I will explain you what we mean for free water. These are some picture of our laboratory and the university test that we made some years ago. We started from 4 centimeters of substrate. Then, as Dusty said, in Italy, we have made in 2007 a norm, then revised in 2015. That is really created for our climate. And it is really a performance norm. It is, honestly speaking, in any case, we started from FLL norm, but we modified the norm, adapting to the Mediterranean climate. Just to one sentence, that's for a natural soil, is impossible to fulfill the requirements of a substrate. And this is the graph of the water potential curve. So again, you have in the horizontal axis, you have the decreasing water content, and in the vertical axis, you have the pressure, so the strength that you need to take over the water. So what you see here, that you have a first part of the curve in which you have a lot of water, and even if you have a strong decrease of water content, the vegetation really feel really not enough difference because there is so much water. Then there is a part with higher gradient in which for a small difference of water, the plants must make a lot of effort to take it over. So, and you see more and more. So, and then you have the withering point. So what is important in our climate, in the semi-arid Mediterranean and so on, is to make our system, the green roof system, to work in this high gradient area between the PF2, we call it, and PF4.2. These are agronomic terms. Why? Because in this way, the vegetation can adjust, can manage the water content. So the water content then is, how can I say, the vegetation then manage and it adapts to this water content, and it is much more safe than in a situation like the first part of the curve in which you have a lot of water, in which the plants try to grow more than the others plants and evaporating a lot. So it's not the optimal. So in this part, the vegetation stays much healthier, needs much less water, and it can manage the water much better. So we create these parameters. That's really, they are in the norm. That's really are really the good parameter to describe a substrate in Mediterranean or semi-arid climate. So we have seen many pictures. An example in a semi-arid and like in Sicily, this is a typical vegetation. Garriga is made a lot from bushes because the bushes are the plants that can manage the different quantity of water, no? Because they close the stoma, evaporate less, so they have some water reserve and so on. And I don't want to enter in the vegetation choice, but this is the target. What about sedum? Okay, sedum is everywhere. You have a lot of species everywhere. I don't know, 2,000 species, if I'm not wrong. So you can find it locally. the sedum. So this is CCD again. This is on the University of Palermo. You can see the sedum surviving. They put a really small quantity of water, and the sedum is surviving. So you can use sedum everywhere, in fact, but don't forget that the sedum needs, at least in the Mediterranean area, needs the maintenance. So you have to pick up the weeds that arrive. And in any case, you have to irrigate just a little bit, because otherwise we have seen that high temperature of substrate and a lot of irrigation are in favor of the weeds. So the sedum is not, we don't have the sedum plants. Okay, thank you. I hope that I could explain in a certain way this difficult concept. Maybe Dusty, you can little bit explain also. Because, okay, thank you very much.
If you could stop sharing the screen, Maurizio, that'd be cool. Yeah, so what Maurizio didn't cover is that actually how they irrigate is to irrigate within that gradient. So they don't over irrigate, they irrigate to just keep the plant available water at the right place. I think I'm correct in saying, Maurizio. And I've got quite a few videos about this plant available water coming, because I spent a week with Maurizio talking about this. And my view is, just for everybody who's from north of the Mediterranean, and probably in a lot of places in the United States, America, and Canada, is the approach in Italy is something we need to learn about in the north because of climate change. Now, we've got a few questions. I can't see any questions in the chat, and I don't know whether my chat box has failed me or something. Mineral wool substrates are recommended as an option to store a lot of water. I'm not going to comment on that, but I know that wool was used in Switzerland. It's been used in the UK, and it's very, very good at retaining water. But my concern there is it plant available water. And there's a lot of discussion about biochar. Both Bruce and Ed mentioned Melbourne, Burnley. They looked at biochar. Biochar is not very good at sometimes giving plants the water. It keeps it, and you have to have high grade biochar. Now, has anybody got any questions they want to put into the chat? I have gone through all the questions that were sent to us, and I just want to highlight this one because we've got a couple of people from Africa, and they've asked questions about sub-Sahara Africa, and it's from Angola, the gentleman is, and I'll hand over to Ed and anybody else, but I would check out what they do in Brazil if you're Angola, because there's a lot of work going on in Brazil, particularly in Rio de Janeiro, and there's a really cool guy building green roofs over in Rio de Janeiro. I'm just assuming that the climate's relatively similar, and I suspect some parts of Angola are subtropical, and that's when you get more into intensive green roofs. You got any thoughts on that, Ed and Bruce? Just because I think it's a good question to answer, because green roofs aren't big in Africa at the moment, so it's a good place to maybe give some of our thoughts. Over to you, Ed. You got any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know Angola enough to make any intelligent remarks. I think but I think local, there's work done on evaporative cooling too. So rather than trying to make the roof really miserly with water, sometimes in those climates, you're choosing plants with high evaporative transpiration rates for evaporative cooling. And that might be appropriate in some of those climates that need cooling. But then you get in the tropics, the concern about insects that carry disease and having them up there, you get into a whole other set of complexities about human health and comfort and all that. So I think that, again, what Bruce was saying, the more local research we get, the better.
Yeah. Well, if I can add on to that. Sorry, Bruce, over to you. Sorry, Bruce. Yeah.
I would just say the only thing I know about green roofs in Africa is that somebody from South Africa, I believe, contacted me a few years back and was just asking a few questions. So there could be some research going on down in South Africa. So if
that's Mediterranean.
Mediterranean, yeah. So if you do a search online, you might be able to find something there.
Yeah, my feeling about Angola, parts of Angola, and that's southern Africa rather than South Africa,
Right.
is it's going to be very, very like the Cerrado in Brazil, which is probably a bit like parts of Texas, Oklahoma, in terms of climate, would be my thinking. I hope that's helped the gentleman from Angola or the lady from Angola. One thing I wanted to bring up, because there's not a huge amount of questions coming in, is what I found interesting about Borrego Springs, and I put a little link into it there, and I've noticed, and obviously Ed knows my friend John Little, is that, you know, in our droughts, when you've got a very compact surface, the green roofs do much, much better. And the old logic was that you had to have an open surface to get the air in, but that lets the heat in. And quite a few people have mentioned that to me who've done private research. Just want to get your thoughts, because the Borrego Springs is pretty compact, and therefore the heat can't get in. Any thoughts on that, Bruce?
Yeah, I guess that gets to the question of the substrate as well. You know, that's just natural soil that they placed up there. I haven't seen the cross section, what's underneath there, but I know it's a concrete deck, and they have some kind of a substrate there. And it's not a walkable. I mean, you can walk on the roof, but the place where the public views it is in a like a rooftop sidewalk, so people are not necessarily walking on there. I think it's very difficult to take the natural soil and just place it on a roof unless there's been some trials on that. Like the roof I mentioned in Fort Worth, Texas, they used a little bit of natural soil, but they had pilots. They had little modules. They tested it to see how it would perform. I know that natural soils have clogged green roofs in certain situations. You know, you have to answer questions. Is the roof draining internally to the building? Is the water draining off the roof to the side? Like Anza Borrego, the water drains off to the side. So it connects to the natural drainage of the area. So I think, you know, there are a lot of those kinds of questions that need to be answered to bring the natural soil onto a roof. It's not a simple yes or no. The trial part is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I was saying, just to highlight the point, is certainly my colleague John Little doesn't use a natural soil, he uses ceramic waste, but that tends to compact at the surface and stop the heat getting in, which in the drought can cause problems. You got any thoughts on that, Bruce? And then I'll hand over to Maurizio, because I know Maurizio will have some thoughts on that. Yeah, over to you, Ed.
Oh, okay, Dusty.
Yeah,
you are right. I know also Paolo has some experience about this topic.
Yeah,
but that's true. But you know, we are in favor of the artificial substrates, because it's very difficult to make a research on natural soil, because natural soil is always different. So when you get a result, then this result is valid for other cases. So it's very, 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 very difficult. But on the other hand, that's true. We have to try to find some system, I don't know yet, which kind of system to keep the humidity inside, but without reducing the permeability. Because if you reduce the permeability, then the water cannot come in. So it is not, probably in the future, okay, don't think about UK, okay, or continental weather in which you have a lot of water, and so the clayey layer can be always saturated. But consider Mediterranean, in which you have 2, 3 months, 4 months not raining. So this clayey soil become like a cement. So it's not permeable anymore. So it's in my opinion, something in the future will happen. Somebody will find a system or something like that is permeable, but in the meantime can reduce the temperature. This is a big topic, a big challenge. This is my idea.
Zoltan, you're obviously in Romania. You use, I mean, I'm really keen on you talking about a white substrate, because I think white's very, very useful, even in a temperate climate that I live in. So, you got any thoughts on that, about keeping the heat out but letting the water in? Because obviously you've got to let the water in, Maurizio. Any thoughts, Zoltan?
Well, can you repeat the question? I have some network issues.
Okay, Zoltan, I was talking about use a really you highlighted using a white or a pale coloured substrate, but I'm interested in also does it keep the heat out? Does it keep the heat out? I mean, obviously reflects the heat, but does it keep the heat out of the substrate?
Well, we use the substrate due to its other characteristic. First of all, it's the high porosity. It's quite stable. It's not compacting easily. And retain a lot of water. And also this type of substrate is used in ecological agriculture as supply of oligo elements and also kalium. So we use it especially for this characteristic. Of course, if it's used for installing a roof by seedling, it's important the fact that it reflects the sun, and the temperature is lower than in comparison with regular black soil. Also, I've seen in chat a question about mineral wool substrate and is it an option or not? What are pros and cons regarding this option? We made in Romania a 5,000 square meter green roof with mineral wool, and we had a lot of problems with bird damage. So the whole stratification was very shallow. On top of this type of substrate, I will avoid telling the trade name. So on top of that, we put just 2 centimeters of substrate and sedum blanket. It was an irrigated roof, and even it was saturated with water. A lot of birds use this material as nesting materials, and sometimes the whole roof looks like after the Ukrainian war.
Okay, well, I've got one question just popped in. I'll just quickly answer it and then I'll sum up. But Greece, do you have any experience with Greece? There's a lot of green. There were a lot of green roofs put in Greece back in 2010, 2012. The interesting thing I found out when I visited a lot of those is they were using plants that collected condensation in the winter, which helped the plants that were really sensitive. But you know, Athens, Attica is virtually Palermo. So it's really, we're getting close to North Africa there. So the temperature is probably similar to Palermo. There's lots of interesting green roofs in northern Italy, which I visited because you just had a question. But there are some in Central Europe. I've visited a few of those, and I've got a lot of videos of some of Maurizio's roofs in the north of Italy. I've got to sum up. I'd like to just, as a conclusion, if I may, gentlemen, and if you can nod, if your network allows you, is I think even in northern climes where we're maritime climes like where I live, we've got a lot to learn from the hot and dry, because the hot and dry will inform how we do green roofs. Thanks, Ed and Bruce, nodding. And that's going to be part of some of these videos I'm making with and for Maurizio. So to sum up, if I may, I'll get my slideshow ready and then share it because I've got a couple of slides to show you. Window, there we go. Hopefully a share. There we go. Right. So I'll get it into the right place. Play. Right. First of all, I'd really like to thank Zoltan and Maurizio, who are both members of the European Federation. I'm a member through Grow, and I'm really pleased to see Ed and Bruce talking. I mean, it's very early their side when they had to start, but you know, they've got so much knowledge, and it's great that they can share that to European audience, but the international audience. A couple of things come out. We've got an EFB webinar on stormwater management on the 16th of October, and we have our EFB open meeting for EFB members. It's only for our members on the 30th of October. So I'd like to say thank you. I'd like to thank Tetiana in the office. She works really, really hard organising all of this. And thanks very much, everybody. I'll stop sharing so you can see me. Maurizio, thanks a lot. as
Thank
ever.
you, Dusty.
I think that plant. What did you think about this plant available water side, Bruce? Because and Ed, because I think it's very interesting the way that they do this in Italy in terms of plant available water as a thing to focus on. Got any thoughts on that, Ed? Bruce?
Yeah, well, I have a platform here that is about 10 years old, and it's one side is 2 inches of media, or what is it, 5 centimeters of media, and then another 5 centimeters of wool, of rock wool. Right next to it is 10 centimeters of just media, and the plant response is much superior with all the media, but the stormwater performance is much higher on the rock wool. So the rock wool limits itself mostly to Northern European succulents, and if you want to get into grasses and forbs, you need the bigger root zone. So I think that plant available water is not in the rock wool nearly as much. The roots get in there, but it just doesn't pull it. It doesn't have the strength to pull the water up into the vascular system. And the sedums are more shallow rooted. So I think they are just not there. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot of difference because they are able to live in the shallow surface in our high rainfall climate. So, and I think, you know, in Melbourne, every green roof design has to have a water budget associated with it.
Yeah.
So that's part of their planning process. There's always a water budget, and they have to then show the client, like, okay, where's the water coming from, and how you're getting it to the plants. So that's just part of their design process.
Yeah, if I can, this is the reason why we are working on the available water, because if you have to irrigate, the challenge is to irrigate the less as possible. This is our idea, no? So we are working on that.
Yeah. And that's what's very interesting, Ed. You got any thoughts on that, Bruce? And then I'm going to go to Zoltan because I've got one question for him, actually.
Yeah, other than I'm not doing that research right now, but I think I'm convinced that it's really important part of the question. We are irrigating, and we're just going blind. You know, I go up to the roof and look and see how they're doing, but we really need to quantify that and see how much water we're giving versus, you know, the natural rainfall, and how are the plants responding to those different depths and the different plant communities as well. Yeah, I just wish there was more money out there for people to do this research, you know.
Well, if I may,
sorry.
Well, I just wanted to highlight Mark Simmons, sadly, who passed away. He did so much work down at Ladybird Johnson. He was an Englishman down there, and he talks a lot. You know, in my part of Texas, it rains once a year. Why do we need to worry about stormwater? You know, let's focus on getting the plants being good. You know, Ed, back to you, and then I'm going to go to Zoltan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think with climate change, the one thing we have to work on with green roofs is maybe resilience and plasticity, because, you know, England has been a low rainfall, high frequency climate for a long time. And now you're seeing big periods of drought and then much heavier rainfalls than you've ever had. So our systems have to respond and be much more flexible and plastic than they've ever had to been.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could go on about that. Sometimes my roofs, we get a drought, they all die, and then a month later it rains, and then they're all off again, you know. Yeah. But I wanted to talk to Zoltan because I was very interested in this board, which is not a bicuspid board. And I have a board over here that in our droughts is really, really making the green roofs work well. So Zoltan, you showed a photograph of quite a compact board, which was on the left-hand side. How thick was that board?
Well, we have different types, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeter, up to 6 centimeter, and almost every centimeter of thickness can retain around 10 liter of water. And even you put on top of that the saturated board a huge weight, it will not press it out, so it will retain also under the pressure of the substrate. Of course, a few minutes ago, you mentioned that there are huge rainfalls sometimes. Its drainage capacity is not too good. So if we want to design a perfect roof, we have to use underneath this retention board a classic drainage and retention board with cup-like cavities. And on that, to put these boards, but not too close to each other, to let at least 1-2 centimeter spaces between them. And this is a perfect version. We use this kind of solution in our last project near the seaside, where about 3 weeks ago, we had torrential rainfall. In 2 hours, we had 246 liter per square meter. So the whole city was flooded. There was 10 centimeters of water in the supermarket, but the roof behaved well.
Well, that's good. I mean, there's a lot of floods over Central Europe at the moment, and sadly, all over actually. But what I found interesting about this board that Zoltan had is it actually becomes a growing medium as well as a storage board. That's what I've found in the UK. And the board I've got is not bad at draining, but putting a 5mm drainage board underneath just to facilitate it. But I'm sure Maurizio will not agree with that, because Maurizio and I are old friends arguing about stuff like that. But it's 14:39. There's still people listening in. We're just having an informal chat. But I think what we'll do is we'll end it, let you all go about your business. Lovely as ever, friends. And well done, Zoltan and Maurizio, for doing it in a second language. You're fine.
The third language. I have to.
Third language, of course. Zoltan's a Hungarian Romanian. Yeah, well said. Curse them, Zoltan. Yeah, here you go. Thank you very much.
Dusty.
Really.
Thank you, Zoltan. Thank you, Maurizio. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you very much.
Ciao,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao, Bella.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Yeah.